welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling what is honestly one of the most staggering corporate reversals in modern tech history. We're going to walk chronologically through how the absolute undisputed king of computer chips, the company that literally defined the industry for half a century, went from feeling utterly invincible to, well, fighting for relevance. And spoiler alert here, it all boils down to one catastrophic mistake. They started believing their own hype. Let's flash back to 2017. Intel CEO is standing up on stage, effectively declaring total victory. And it made perfect sense, right? At that exact moment, 90% of PCs ran on Intel processors. Their factories were churning out the most advanced chips on the planet. They were riding high, celebrating this massive $250 billion market cap. They were the undisputed giants of the tech world. But let's fast forward to today, just 7 short years later. That massive, seemingly invincible empire crumbled down to a valuation of $95 billion. That is a precipitous drop. And the crazy part is, they didn't just lose ground to one competitor, they started losing to all of them. To really put the cost of this lost dominance into perspective, you literally just have to look at nvidia. This is a company that Intel completely dismissed for years as just this niche maker of gaming graphics cards. Well, today nvidia is worth an astronomical $3 trillion. Absolutely wild, right? The contrast is just mind-blowing. So how on earth did we get here? For decades, Intel wasn't just a chip company. They were the chip company. Way back in 1981, when IBM built the very first PC, they chose Intel, which permanently locked in the x86 architecture standard. And Intel didn't just lead that standard. They completely monopolized it. Entire software ecosystems and operating systems were built around them. Because of this massive lock-in, throughout the 90s and 2000s, Intel was basically generating pure profit. We're talking insane 60% margins. Imagine manufacturing a little chip for $50 and effortlessly selling it for $200. It was literally a license to print money. And driving all of this unprecedented success was a concept you've probably heard of, Moore's Law.
This was Intel's incredibly reliable, seemingly unbreakable roadmap. It predicted that chip transistor counts would double every 2 years, leading to smaller, faster, and way more efficient tech.
And generation after generation, Intel always led the charge. Okay, so to understand where things went off the rails, you have to understand how Intel functioned. For years, they operated on this flawless clockwork rhythm they called Tick-Tock. It happened every 2 years. Tick, you shrink the transistors. Tock, you build a brand new architecture on that smaller process. It was brilliant. But then in 2014, they tried to move to 10 nanometer chips. Guys, that is 10 billionths of a meter. Etching at that microscopic scale requires extreme ultraviolet light. Literally, a single particle of dust ruins the whole chip. Well, Intel's process broke. Most of their chips came out completely defective, and the physical limits of shrinking transistors completely shattered their legendary cycle. When you look at the timeline of this delay, a process that was supposed to take 2 short years ended up taking a grueling 6. From 2014 to 2019, while Intel was stuck endlessly delaying, trying to fix things and redelaying, they were essentially frozen in time. But here is the brutal truth. The rest of the industry, they absolutely did not wait for them. And this really highlights Intel's fatal strategic arrogance. They truly believed they had to do it all, design the chips and physically manufacture them. But over in Taiwan, TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, took a totally different route. They didn't design anything. They focused exclusively on manufacturing chips for whoever was willing to pay. And because TSMC only had to focus on production, they became highly optimized. Meanwhile, Intel was stretched incredibly thin trying to do both, and it was about to cost them the entire game. Just contrast Intel's static timeline with TSMC's relentless march forward. By 2018, TSMC was already churning out 7 nanometer chips at scale, which was way better than Intel's heavily delayed 10 nanometer tech. Then by 2020, TSMC hit 5 nanometers. Now this is a massive milestone because it allowed Apple to successfully ditch Intel processors, which they had relied on for 15 years, and launch their ridiculously fast, highly efficient M1 Mac chips. And get this, Intel's CEO at the time totally dismissed it, claiming Apple would regret the move. Well, sales skyrocketed and Intel lost their biggest customer. Meanwhile, let's look at their oldest rival, AMD. For basically a decade, AMD was the undisputed underdog. But in 2017, they launched their Ryzen chips. Now these were designed by AMD, but crucially they were manufactured by TSMC. AMD took a massive, measurable bite right out of Intel's desktop share, jumping from 10% up to 35%. And it gets even worse for Intel. AMD utilized TSMC's superior power efficiency to start devouring Intel's highly lucrative data center market, selling directly to tech giants like Amazon and Google. But then came the absolute knockout punch. As the AI boom exploded, the whole world realized that training these massive AI models required intense parallel processing. NVIDIA's specialized graphics chips, their GPUs, were perfectly designed for this. And who manufactures NVIDIA's chips? Yep, TSMC again. NVIDIA's hardware quickly became the undisputed backbone of the entire industry, and Intel just completely missed the boat. When they finally managed to ship their own AI chips, nobody bought them because they were already 2 full generations behind NVIDIA. Okay, so despite being locked out of the mobile ARM chip market, losing their biggest client in Apple, bleeding desktop share to AMD, and getting absolutely lapped by NVIDIA and AI, Intel just kept selling this narrative that a big comeback was right around the corner. In 2021, their new CEO, Pat Gelsinger, stepped up and announced a very bold $100 billion plan. The big promise? They were going to build new U.S. factories and somehow claw their way back to global manufacturing leadership by 2025. But we really need to look at the uncomfortable reality here. Building a cutting-edge fabrication plant from scratch takes a minimum of 5 years. Intel's incredibly bold timeline relies on this total fantasy where their competitors are just going to sit perfectly still and wait for them. But TSMC absolutely refuses to wait. In fact, they're investing double Intel's amount, $200 billion, to aggressively push toward 3, 2, and even 1 4-nanometer chips. Honestly, Intel isn't just trying to catch a moving train at this point. It's like they're trying to catch a bullet train while riding a bicycle. You see, Intel losing its manufacturing crown isn't just a sad story for Wall Street investors. It is an urgent global vulnerability. The harsh truth we have to face is that TSMC currently controls about 90% of the entire world's advanced chip production, and they're located entirely in Taiwan, which is a region under constant geopolitical threat from China. If Taiwan's fabs were to suddenly go offline, the entire global tech supply chain, iPhones, AI servers, cloud infrastructure, the whole shebang, grinds to an absolute halt. Recognizing this terrifying bottleneck, the U.S. government stepped in and passed the CHIPS Act, injecting $52 billion to try and bring semiconductor manufacturing safely back to American soil. And naturally, Intel received the largest single slice of this CHIPS Act funding, a massive $20 billion. Why? Simply because they are virtually the only American option left that actually has the foundational knowledge for advanced processor manufacturing. Think about that for a second. The United States is currently betting its future technological independence, along with a massive pile of taxpayer money on a company that is fundamentally struggling just to catch up. And that brings us to the end of our chronological journey today. In the semiconductor industry, you have to understand that falling behind compounds, you must 1 generation, you're essentially back 2 steps. Well, Intel missed 3, and they didn't lose because they lacked the money or the resources. They lost because of sheer arrogance. They truly believed their manufacturing lead was just going to last forever. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Can a company that squandered an absolute monopoly and fell years behind the curve ever truly reclaim the future? Or will the titan that literally defined the computer age spend the next 50 years just chasing ghosts? Thanks for joining me for this explainer.